right. So that moves us to the discussion agenda, which is the discussion of the proposed 2024-2025 school calendar, Exhibit J.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Thanks for having me again to talk. It doesn't seem possible, but the 2024-25 academic calendar. Just to give you a little bit of background so far this year, we came up with 2 draft calendars this year. We have presented both to our principals and directors, to our parent advisory, to our faculty advisory, and then we have also completed an online community input survey on this. The comments and results among all the groups, as well as the online survey, have been very close, really about 50-50 among all the groups. So if I could just a moment, I'd love to share some of the highlights with you. In a lot of ways, they're very similar. They both observe the same fall break. They both observe the same spring break, although option B does grant 1 additional day. They both also, there is a state statute that requires us to close schools on even year election days. So we certainly want to honor that in 2024, and so both calendars reflect school closure on election day. The way that they are different is that option B has a little bit earlier start date, but has the added instructional benefit of completing the first semester before the winter break. So all exams would be completed before winter break, and then students who have semester classes would start fresh with semester 2 when they return after winter break. So that is the main difference between the two. Option B, because of the little bit earlier start date, does allow a little bit more flexibility with days off throughout the year. As I mentioned, there is an extra day at spring break. And then in March, a 3-day weekend is turned into a 4-day weekend in option B. So this is just for discussion tonight, obviously, but we are happy to answer any questions or take feedback.
You know I have feedback. Does anyone have any questions, Mr. Satterfield?
Yeah, I'm going to open Pandora's box here and be the first one. I know teachers probably feel like we keep starting earlier and earlier and earlier. I can tell you as a second, when I worked at the elementary school, it's just different from the high school, but I can tell you with regards to ending that first semester before the holidays and getting all those exams out of the way, we spent a lot of time of trying to get into recovery after the holidays to get kids ready for exams, which is a difficult task, especially for a lot of your borderline students that you've been spending so much time and energy. And I was thinking about, I looked at some of the materials on graduation rates at the different schools, and in my mind, I'm thinking that probably option B, getting the first semester over before the break seems like a good idea. I know it's starting school a little earlier, but I think for those students that, especially those borderline students, those are the ones that you're really trying to push across the finish line. Even though it's the middle of the year, there is a finish line there too at the high school level. So, but that's my input.
It looks like the faculty and staff kind of thought that was a better option too.
It's interesting to me to look at the data points because you're speaking from a student's perspective of wanting to have exams done, but we didn't really get great student feedback on this at all. The majority of the parents in the district are the respondents. 64% of parents responded to this as opposed to 30% of staff, and it doesn't even have a number for the student participation. So, I mean, I would think that it would, I mean, if that was the argument, I would think that the students would make that argument that they would want to have their semester done prior to winter break. I mean, high school student. I mean, you're talking about a high school student. They are old enough to be able to. I would think that they would give their input if they felt strongly about that. I also see that the option A, the 50 it's 53% to 46%, I believe, in favor of option A, which is the starting on the August 13th. I mean, personally, I just think that we keep moving the start date up and up and up. And I would have a question about whether or not we're moving the age of a kindergartner up as well. So right now, a kindergarten, I think the cutoff is at the very end of August, very beginning of September of being 5 to start kindergarten. So if we move it all the way up to the beginning of August, are we changing the age of when you start school? Because there is a significant difference in a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old in the same grade. So when you're talking about student progress as they get older, you're going to see the difference in maturity levels and academic levels in an elementary school student when they're really building those foundational building blocks. I mean, in my very not unprofessional, I will totally admit that, I'm not a school psychologist. I would just assume that would be a factor into starting school so early that we might want to look at. I mean, that's a concern for me. Personally, I like A because it starts later. I think that like I said, I mean, we used to start school towards the end of August, and now we're looking at the first week of August. And that, I mean,
I think
I'm not a fan.
I think actually at one time we started after Labor Day.
Well, we did. Well, when I was in school, we started
That's when we
after
started,
Labor
yeah.
Day. So now, I mean, think about that. That's a whole month
That's right.
of a difference. So, Ms. Huddle.
I'm going to change tacks just a little bit about one of the beauties of not having a dog in this fight is that you hear from everybody that does. And the biggest thing I hear is half days. I just cannot tell you how many calls and emails and texts I get from parents who are like, it's worthless. That's what they tell me, is that the kids don't learn anything and it's a hassle for them. So what can we do to not do half days is my question.
Are you referring to the half days at the end of the school year or the early release days throughout the year?
Both. I mean, I've not heard from one person who said that they like them and that they work.
I don't like them, but I know that my children do work on those days. I mean, I'm not a fan of them just because we have to make accommodations for those days, but they're not doing work. They're not like going and rolling in a VCR like they used to do when we were in school and putting in, a movie.
Yeah,
That's not happening. They're actually doing work, but it's more a hassle because I have to make arrangements with work and I have younger kids. I mean, that's just
I mean, the big question I get is, can we just not take, let's say there's 6 early release half days and say we're going to have 3 days off and 3 whole days? That's the biggest question I get, is just why can't we multiply and divide?
Ms. McCaskill, if you can talk to kind of instructionally hours and things of that nature, what we're dealing with those half days.
Right, so we have to do 180 school days. And so even if you take 2 half days and put them together, that makes 1 day. That doesn't say that we really made 2 days. So we have to do 180 school days. Now, the early release days that the elementary and intermediate schools have, those are instructional. We do not do recess day. We don't do recess on those days. It's all instruction up until 11:40. And then the rest of that day is set aside for teacher planning on those days. So that is very important. Our elementary teachers get very little planning as it is. They have 45 minutes if they're lucky. But that's inclusive of their unencumbered time now. They do get 30 minutes of that if our schools are using planning. But that's something that's just very important for the planning purposes of teachers, and they are very instructional. Now, the 3 days that I know the state allows for the early release days that we typically use at the end of the school year, a lot of that is done with secondary in mind, a lot with getting grades done as far as getting their exams graded and into Power School, finishing up, making sure that the last day that students leave that the grades are done. So I understand that from a parent's perspective, because I don't have a dog in the fight now either, but I did at one time, and I understand that piece of it from a parent's perspective, but from the running of the school building itself, those are very instructional days and are necessary for the running of the school.
So part of the issue is that we have the number of hours that we have to be in school total, but we also have to be in school 180 days. So we can't take 4 half days and make 2 whole days, or we'll be short our 180 days. Okay. One other thing just to share that I hear from parents is, this one's not universal, but I would say it leans more toward, when we have weather days, can we not do virtual? Can we just use the weather days? Some people say they like them, but I hear more from people who don't like them. They would just rather use the because I think we get an allotment of so many, right? 5, yeah. So just passing that along.
The only thing about that is that then it would need to be made up. We have hazardous weather makeup days in the calendar.
Yeah, they understand that. I mean, the ones that I've talked to understand that. They just feel like I'm just passing this along, don't shoot the messenger. They feel like sometimes maybe it's so easy now that we do it more than we would have in the past. That we say, oh, it's a weather day and you have to do virtual, and they're working and their teenage child's at home and they doubt anything really happens. So just, again, passing it along.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Barnhart.
2 parts to this, as someone who has 3 dogs in the fight in 3 different areas of the schools. First off, to Mr. Satterfield's point, I understand where you're coming the difference in A and B of having all of the exams, having everything done at the end of the first semester, and then not having to carry it on because, after those times out of school, it kind of takes a little while for the kids to get back on track and focus. So to have the exams before, and then they can just be done with it for the semester and then pick up, bright and early in January. I like that idea. But then again, like Ms. Hines said, the majority of the people who did respond to this seem to prefer A. So I'm really not sure where we've landed with that, but obviously it's still just a discussion. But to the half-day point, I figured it was something like that with the teacher, planning and stuff in the afternoons, which are highly beneficial. Is there any way that, because like Ms. Huddle said, I've heard from a lot of parents, and I am one of them, with the half days, but is there any possible way that they could be moved to the Friday instead of the Thursday? Because a lot of people I've heard from have said, if the half days were on a Friday, well then, maybe they have a vacation they could take or somewhere, plans that they might have for the weekend, and then they could start the weekend early, as opposed to like say a Thursday or a Wednesday even, that it just kind of interrupts the week and just kind of throws everything off for the families. Is there any possible way that half days like that could be moved to Fridays, or no?
Okay, here's just real talk. If we go to Fridays, the kids won't come to school at all. They'll just take off the day on Friday, and that'll just not, they just won't come to school at all. It'll end up adding additional attendance issues for students.
That makes sense.
I've gotten, to Barnhart's point, I've gotten that feedback too about looking at it from a Friday for people who maybe don't have family close by and it causes an inconvenience with the half days. It may be easier to get help. Maybe grandparents can pick them up and then they don't have to be rushed trying to shuffle them back and forth. I do understand what Ms. McCaskill is saying. That's a tricky one because on one hand, it should be on the parent to make sure that their kids are going to school on the half days. You almost want to say, they need to figure that part of it part of it out. Maybe there's an option to look at some Fridays, and maybe they're not all on Thursdays or something like that, just to kind of be a little bit more responsive to the community feedback that we're getting. Obviously, I don't sit on your side of the table, so I don't know all that, goes into it, but do think it's important that we just kind of bring up some of those kind of reoccurring concerns, complaints that we receive.
Right, and when we talk about like the half days, and that's the elementary school students and the intermediate school students, it's different than high school students that can just go home and be home alone. So the concern that I hear is the after-school care or the child care component from working parents. And sometimes the after-school programs don't have the staff. I know that we've had that situation where they don't have the staff in the middle of the day for an after-school safari or whatever the after-school program is. And so if you don't sign up in time, then your child doesn't have a spot, or they may just not have it at all if there is a staffing issue with whoever's providing the staffing. And that makes it a little bit, I don't know that we have all of the solutions for that, but I know that that's a concern that I hear and we've experienced, Mr. Hogan.
So another curveball, and I know it's not here, but has the district ever had serious conversations about a true modified year-round schedule?
I'm
I'm gonna throw something at him.
That's my cue. One of the things that we talked about with the shrinking summer is with our capital projects campaign. And I'm not for it until we can get our facilities at a rate where we can turn these back over. I think if you remember my first year, our struggle with Dutch Fork Elementary just doing HVAC work. You can see the Office of School Facilities, everybody is reaching on them at one time. And so any kind of capital work to get that back is really tough. We had this discussion at the Midland Superintendent's Symposium and talked about who's moving that direction. I think only Fairfield is doing that. Some of the things that we run into is going to be that child care situation as well. If your child care providers don't move with you, then during those 2-week, forgot what they call them, but they're 2-week interims that they do, you're going to run into the same thing. So it's not going to be a Friday afternoon or a Thursday afternoon. It's for 2 weeks during the fall, the schools are closed. And what do we do with the children there? So it's not my recommendation at this time. I'll also think about during those 2 weeks for our learners that need a lot of support, it seems like you have to re-gear them back up. And as we all know, the summer slide learning loss. So there's data to support it, but there's a lot of data that's concerning when you have students who need a lot of interventions taking those breaks. So we've had that conversation, but I have not moved forward for a recommendation with it.
I'll take that as a maybe. All right.
Ignore Mr. Hogan. Ms. Taylor, next meeting when we bring this back for a first reading, is the district administration are they gonna provide a recommendation from the district?
Yes, ma'am. We'll take the feedback from tonight and provide a recommendation.
Okay. Mr. Scully?
All right, since you're taking feedback, then mine is
A.
And I think we strongly need to give the opinion and the weight of teachers' opinions on this a great deal of weight, just because they're the ones that we're going to rely on to really make it happen effectively. So I am personally A, starting B. I totally understand it around the December and the winter dates, but man, starting August 1st for those teachers, that's July 31st is the end of the summer for them. That means those family vacations have to wrap up that last week of July. That's just tough. So my personal opinion is A. I just want to put that out there. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Huddle.
Dr. Ross, in talking to the other local superintendents, did either of these kind of line up with what? And the reason I'm asking is kind of back to the daycare thing is I think it's easier if all the schools are very similar, particularly around Christmas. in the summer?
Yeah, so winter holidays, spring break, start of school, summer release, all of those are what you try to line up regionally because there's a lot of crossover in metropolitan areas between families that work here. I work in this district, but my children go to school in that district. There's a lot that goes into the planning of these two options. I would say we most align with Lexington 1 because of that crossover we have in our calendars. And Ms. Taylor, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
And Lexington 1's newly released calendar is most like option B with the start date.
And actually, that's why I asked, because correct me if I'm wrong, but one big difference is option B is 3 weeks at Christmas and option A is 2 weeks at Christmas. Am I right about that? Well, 2.5. Option A is 2.5, like it's, and then option B is just 2, I think.
It's the same number of days for students off. It's just the way it's spread out on the calendar.
Okay.
I think it's 11 days. for
You're
both.
right, it just looks
It
different.
looks different.
Okay. Which of these is more like Lexington 1?
Option B.
Option B. Okay, thank you.
And most childcare, but most childcare options are custom to where the district is. So ICRC, they have all of their programs that match District 5. So I think that it just kind of depends on where you live and individual situations. Just my thoughts. I appreciate this, Ms. Taylor. This was very thorough.
Okay, thank
Very
you.
lively discussion. Hold on, one more question from Ms.
Just one more
Barber.
quick
One more.
question.
Okay, good.
For the data points, how was that sent out?
It was
Email?
sent out through email through our mass notification system.
Gotcha, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so that brings us to the shortest conversation on the agenda, which is item 22, the discussion of our instructional plan review.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, and our community. I'll go through my part fast, and but we're going to, as my son said, take it back to the olden days of the 1900s when I was born, and talk about how school has changed over time and how technology and education have intersect. And these are just images that we talked about last year when we talked about growth and technology in our schools. I asked our community and I asked our staff, do they know what a Kodak moment is? And then when they answered that question, I said, when was the last time you used a Kodak to capture a Kodak moment? The reason that we may not have been using devices like this is because of how time advances and technology advances. It's very interesting to believe that when you look at the 70s and the 80s, that at one time Kodak had 90% of the market share, but it wasn't in cameras. It was actually in film. They were so focused on the work that they did in film and the billions of dollars that they were bringing in film that they could only see a business that had to do with film. If you look at the Kodak stock prices from the late 90s to the 2000s, you could see a decline year after year after year in the overall stock price, the health of the company. The focus, again, was on the film. But it's interesting, in 1975, Steve Sasson invented the digital camera. What was very interesting is that Steve Sasson actually worked for Kodak. When presenting them this idea of a digital camera, they again were at the top of their game in film and did not see any value in moving away from film. All of their purchase orders, their policies, their procedures, they were a film company. What they suffered from is what psychologists call functional fixedness. It's a bias, it's a cognitive mental block that limits you from seeing one thing only in its traditional function. And so if every tool I have is a hammer, then that's only what I'm going to use it for, is to hammer every nail. What they've lost focus in is the inventor of Kodak. His name was George Eastman. And what Eastman gave was a great vision for Kodak. And that was, you press the button, we do the rest. What Eastman said is that it's not, we're not a film company. They were providing an experience. You press the button, we do the rest. Eastman would have adopted Steve Sasson's digital camera because it was the future. It was what that company needed to evolve to. And so I bring this up because we're going to have a conversation about our instructional plans. And yes, we do a great job and doing a great job of the things that we're currently doing, but I don't want us to be an organization that because we're doing well in one thing, that we are not able to pivot and to look at what the future brings. Our vision is that we love and grow every student. In the 45-day count, we had 17,330 students in Lecturate 5. But we know that traditionally, there are students that don't meet that fullest potential that we can do a better job with. Pupils in poverty, we have 7,712 students. And we want to do everything we can. We want to pivot to meet what those students need so that they can feel loved and be able to grow. We have 2,580 students with individualized education plans or in special education. We want to pivot so that we can do everything for those students so that they feel loved and able to grow. We know there are 1,401 students who have who are identified by Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. We want to do everything we can to pivot so those students can feel loved and are able to grow. We have 4,137 students in grades 2 through 8 who are not at grade level proficiency. You know, as we talk about time in school, I need every minute to make sure that I can get these students to meet grade level proficiency. So we want to do everything we can to pivot so that these students can feel loved and are able to grow. And so all students, as we talked about in our opening kickoff this year at Irmo High School, it is a growing season. So yes, we've isolated talked about the students that traditionally we can get better growth with, but this is about every student within the district, finding some amazing opportunities to provide those nourishments, provide that vision, that mission, those outcomes, so that they feel loved and able to grow. So I'm excited about the work of our academics team with collaboration of all the departments to bring forth our instructional plans for our Vision 2030 and our 5-year plan to align. And so at this time, I'm going to ask our Chief of Academics, Ms. McCaskill, to come forth and present those plans. Ms. McCaskill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Board, and Dr. Ross. This is exciting because this is where you start talking about, like, look into the future and what is it that kids need to know. It's hard to know what tomorrow kids need to know. Things are changing so much. But when you think about the data that you've already heard about work-based learning and how much that has increased, what we do know is students can't be in isolation learning how to do math or do science or do social studies or do ELA. That's not going to be the future for them. They need that basis, yes, but they need to see where does that take them in society? How does that get them a job? What does that do later in life for them? And so Mr. Prigge and I have done lots of brainstorming. He's a brain at this. He loves to think in terms of what might be, and then he talks with principals and talks about how it can be. And so I'm going to ask him to talk about some of these, and then he and I are going to tag team this just a little bit. So, Mr. Prigge, I'll turn it over to you. You just mash that button on the back, okay?
Oh, okay. Now that I have instructions how to use technology, Good evening again, Madam Chair, Board, Dr. Ross. We're focusing this evening on our presentation on two different high schools that are in our district and going with the Target 2030 plan. During the school years between 2025 and 2027 at Dutch Fork High School, in the cluster of information technology, we're going to add a major called game and interactive media design. This is something new and upcoming. It's been in the state portions of it for a while, but it's going to be a 3-course completer program. It's Foundations of Animation, Game Design and Development, and Advanced Animations. Now, this program, embedded in this program, I think everybody's heard of esports. Esports will be embedded into this major. So we're going to have at Dutch Fork High School the first esports in District 5. And then go along with that, during the school years of 2025-26, we already have the information technology cluster and the major web and digital communications, which is fundamentals of web page design, advanced web page design. We're going to add the mobile applications development so we can start getting more into app creation and smartphone things. Then along with that, I don't have a date up here yet because the State Department of Education is still developing this under the cluster Information Technology, Major Artificial Intelligence. They're going to have a couple of pilot districts coming out for the 24-25 school year, and then they'll make it a permanent and offer it to all districts. The artificial intelligence is going to talk about what's happening now and what's coming. And the other big one that everybody talks about is the chat GPT. I always get that wrong. So we're going to have students at Dutch Fork High School developing things in that nature. And I can't say too much about it because they haven't put out too much information on what they're going to do with this major. Now, to support at Dutch Fork High School, we have a VEX robotics team. We're going to have the esports, a race engineering challenge, which that team has already been formed, and last Thursday, they competed for the first time, and they placed second overall, and they won the car body design portion of the competition. So we already have regional winners coming out of Dutch Fork High School. And that's the car you see on the right, all the way to the right, that little red car. It's a 110 scale RC car, but it's all STEM based. Then autonomous electric vehicle, which is the second from the left, where the students actually engineer and build an autonomous electric vehicle, because that's another thing that's coming is EV. Well, it's already here, but it's going to get bigger. And then a drone challenge. Now that one is really interesting because they reverse engineer a drone and build another one. And then they compete with it. And then there's a computer science challenge to where that is more on the programming side, and they call it a hacker challenge. So y'all know what hackers are. We're not teaching them to hack people or hack their systems, excuse me, but we're going to be teaching them how to understand all these new systems and how they work. Okay, going over to Irmo High School, we all know it's School of the Arts. Between 25 and 2029, We're going to have the cluster Human Services, Family Consumer Sciences, which we already have there with cosmetology, but we're going to add a new major, Barber, Master Hair Care, and it'll be Barber, Master Hair Care 1, 2, 3, and 4. And they'll have to have, I think it's, if I remember right, 750 contact hours. And then we're adding a new cluster there, Arts, AV, Technology, and Communications. That major hasn't been decided yet because the theatrical set design 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going to design and develop ourselves and submit a innovative program application to the State Department of Education. Then we also will have another under the cluster Arts, AV, Technology, and Communications. The major is Digital Art and Design, and the course is called Digital Art and Design 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're looking at how more and better we can support the School of the Arts. Also, 26 to 30, under Human Services, Family Consumer Sciences, we're going to add nail technology. And it'll be nail technology 1, 2, 3, because that's only a 3 course completer. And a lot of people say doing nails is becoming an art because you can get all kinds of designs, airbrushing, and stuff like that with the nails. 2027 to 2031, under Human Service, Family, Consumer Science, we're going to add the aesthetics, 1, 2, 3, 4, which is another artful one because that deals more with the facial skin, makeup, and like a spa treatment. All right, now, we've been talking about this. The Student Small Business Incubator. It's going to be an opportunity to drive these entrepreneurial majors, and we have these offerings already, these courses that drive toward that type of incubator. Under the cluster Business Management and Administration, we have Business Information Management major, and that is Digital Publication Design, Digital Multimedia, and Image Editing. And under the major, under that cluster, General Management, we're doing Accounting 1, Entrepreneurship, Business Law, and then under the Finance cluster, we're already doing the Business Finance, which is Accounting 1, Business Finance, and Entrepreneurship. These courses are all currently in place, and we have students on waiting lists to get into these courses at Irma High School. It's very, very popular.
Thank you, Mr. Prigge. I want to thank you for that. And as Mr. Prigge said, we have students already on waiting lists for this. I've been working with Mr. Wiseman with LS3P. They're already working on the Irma High School project. Keep in mind what I'm about to show you is only in the visioning standpoint. This is not for construction documents or for any detailed schematics whatsoever. However, the new East Wing has been designed for additions, and I think we've talked about that, where if you look at the current map of Irma High School, the vision is to change or add on to the new East Wing with a new student cafeteria, and then the small business incubator would go in the current cafeteria. That would provide a more user-friendly view and operational structure of Irma High School, but also allow us to expand the small business incubator. So our goal is to help students become job creators. There's a lot of value in building the next generation of entrepreneurs, and so that is, again, a vision of what that would look like at Irma High School. So with that, we'll let you move on to Dutch Fork High School.
And just to finish out Irma High School, our curriculum support there, we will also have the Race Engineering Challenge, the Autonomous Electric Vehicle, And we are right now in the process of requisitioning the drone challenge for Irma High School, and then, of course, computer science challenge. And I'll turn it back over to Ms. McCaskill.
So for Chapin High School, we want to add a fine arts center for Chapin area, because there's not one in that area, and that's something that we would like to add. And included in that is a theatrical set and design, like you heard that being talked about with Irmo High School as well, but that will also be a CTE course that will be able to be offered at Chapin High School as well. We don't want to leave our elementary schools out at all, but our two newest magnets, Harbison West and Seven Oaks. Harbison West, as they get to explore lots of different giftedness throughout all of their students. One area that they're very interested in is also looking at the gaming aspect that would feed possibly into even Dutch Fork High School, as well as they feed their Escalaris and Irmo High School, so that could kind of go both ways there. But really looking at that possible interactive media room is something that they can pursue. And with Seven Oaks, a global studies area, which I know Dr. Ross has talked a lot about, what a cool room that can be with the 3D interactive glasses, where students can put themselves in any part of the world and see that, see how those people live and collaborate with them, and just really indulge themselves in the PYP program, which is what that school's grant is going to be all about. But just looking at those thematic units and being able to be a part of the world that they may never actually see, but that they can be a part of it virtually. And then, Mr. Prigge, if you want to talk, the last thing that we have here is about some construction that is looking at a way that we can continue to incorporate more learning opportunities.
And what we're talking about here is, if we can purchase the property right next to this facility, we would build a outdoor residential and commercial construction lab, which would enhance what we're already doing with building construction, electricity, currently in this building, but we would also add things in the nature of commercial driver's license, diesel technology, and possibly heavy equipment operator. And we would put a course out there, for an example, for the CDL, they have to parallel park a tractor trailer. And there's enough space out there just to do that, because we can't put them behind the wheel because they're not 18. And also, we would put a course out there about moving materials with a forklift, all-terrain forklift. Just like it would be on a construction site, it might be some small hills and bumps and potholes that you have to go through, and how to secure that material as you're moving on a construction site. And we would continue building the tiny homes that we currently build in building construction, that our electricity students also do the wiring for.
Madam Chair, members of the board, before we go into the next component, we'll take any questions about the instructional plan review.
All right, any questions? Mr. Satterfield.
Yeah, I had a couple of them. First of all, I'm excited about the plans with the residential, the building and all that, I think, and the heavy equipment operator. I think that's a real attribute. I was wondering, on your clusters that you're incorporating in each of the schools, a few years back, we had the School to Work initiative, where we incorporated into the curriculum the cluster materials, so to speak. In other words, if you decided you wanted to major in engineering, if you were your math teachers, your English teachers, your science teachers would all incorporate that language and help support those programs. Are you planning to do that for those students who get involved with those clusters?
Spring Hill High School, that's part of their magnet, so they do that now currently. Some of our other high schools don't do that yet, but Dr. Ross and I have had some really exciting conversations about how we could do that, especially with some core groups of students that that would benefit greatly. So I don't think you want me to go into all those details tonight, but yes, we are definitely considering that.
Well, and I'm excited about that because I know that teachers try to find relatedness when they're instructing. And if it's related to something that they're genuinely interested in, something they're working on or they're working towards, and you incorporate examples of, let's say, math with drawings or whatever it might be, in architecture, whatever it might be, they see that and they understand that a lot better. Any of those other programs, you went through a whole listing of different programs at the different high schools. Would not any of those programs be better served here at the Cates Center?
I'll let you answer.
You're correct. That way we could meet and have more enrollment and more students involved. But the issue we have is we're out of space.
You're out of space here?
Right. There's no other space in this building that we can put additional programs. That's why we're looking at spreading it across the different high schools in the district. So, and some of that will be alleviated if we build next door.
Right, right. And one more question for Dr. Ross. Do we still have the STEMS program at Dutch Fork High School?
Correct. We still have the STEMS program. I think, I'm trying to think when STEMS started. You remember that day, right?
It was back when I was there, so it was a long time ago.
So one of
we won't go there, but I was just looking at a lot of what the engineering and the robotics and the math and the science all incorporated. Looked like it was like sort of in the same, it seemed like it would generate a lot of interest. So that's a good strategy there, if that program is still there for sure.
And I'd like to arc back, if you go back to 2006 when we did the high school redesigns and we started with the career clusters and STEM was Dutch Fork High School was the name in STEM. Now there's so many programs and so many STEM programs in STEAM. So this is kind of that 2.0, taking on their strength that they have, great teachers, and now giving them that next level in science, technology, engineering, and math.
Okay, thank you. I'm excited about this. I think that, anything that gets students excited, and they have to see again, something that's relative to them. But sometimes it's like we're speaking a foreign language. But if it's something they can get excited. And I know that Dr. Ross presented earlier about this business model that he wants to bring, this entrepreneurship to Irma High School. I think that is something that I think that would be something that you could be infused in a variety of ways at the school. So anyway, thank you.
Mr. Hogan.
Mr. Prigge, with when you were covering the slides with Irma High School, you'd had like nail technology. I think nail tech is one of them. While I don't have a dog in that fight. The course requirements for that type of stuff, can the student expect to have a certificate of completion to where they could have an immediate impact inside this community if they wanted to go and continue that, or is it more just setting them up to take that next step?
Well, yes, sir. They'll be licensed through the Labor Licensing Board, just like cosmetology is. Same thing as barbering, master hair care, and aesthetics. They're all licensed with the state.
Okay, so with like completion of that, they wouldn't have to go to like a Kenneth Schuler afterwards for a dish. That's in replace of.
It's in the place
Awesome.
of a Kenneth Schuler.
Great.
Mr. Prigge, I noticed on this, I think this is a great, these are great plans and proposals. I mean, I think they're very relevant to what's going on in the world right now and in the business community in the Midlands. And you may have already done this. I just haven't heard you talk about partnerships. Do we have existing partnerships with some of these ideas, or are we reaching out Because I know, like, the gaming, Benedict College has a gaming center, and that may be a scholarship route for our students. You mentioned hacking. I was a sponsor last year with work for a hackathon with HBCUs and the technical colleges, and they like travel around every year where they have these like hack events. It's insane to watch this, but to maybe do something and partner with like a technology company to do that on a high school level, that real world experience, I mean, those kids are amazing, and they, you know, I mean, that's a great resume builder for the students. I figured you probably have had those kind of conversations, or you're thinking about it. I'm just curious if there's like a business support partner that can help us take it.
Yeah, yes, there is. We're required by the state, mandated by the state, to have advisory boards for all of our CTE programs, and that is our next step. We already formed partnerships with Midlands Tech. We've been talking to Full Sail University in Florida with the gaming side, with the theatrical side. And we also have a partnership already with Stanley Community College in North Carolina that has some of the similar items. And I do presentations to the Midlands Workforce Development Board, to MEBA, the Regional Education Center Board, Advisory Board, the RECAB. So we're heavily involved in partnerships, and we reach out to the companies that we can find. One that comes to mind, like with the theatrical side, is, no, I just lost it.
It's okay.
It's an image, SI Image, something like that.
Okay.
Sounds and Images.
Cool.
Yeah,
All right.
they're one of the leading in the Midlands.
Great. Ms. Huddle.
How do you decide what new programs to get into? What's that decision process look like?
We consider student interest, and that's by talking to teachers and talking to students. And also industry side, like I stated, Midlands Workforce Development Board, we go with their industry-focused sectors, which all of these fall under the 6 sectors that they have. And we also listen to other districts. For an example, esports right now currently is in Richland 2 and Fairfield County Career Center. And it's coming around more and more through the State Department. And also, for an example, with the drones, they're doing a lot of piloting with drones right now. And I have become part of the newly formed SC Autonomous Vehicle Committee. We've had 2 meetings now, and we're looking more into the higher technology. So we're out there in the community. We also work with the chambers, IRMO and Chapin Chamber of Commerce.
One of the reasons that I asked is a lot of these require, like the construction, that would be a major investment, okay? But I've talked to a business owner that does cabinetry work, which is not nearly that scale, but it pays really, really well, and he can't find anybody. Similarly, you know, I know a lot of dentists, and they can't find dental assistants. So I don't know, I'm concerned about focusing on things that are very resource intensive if we can't provide those resources, and at the same time hearing that there are well-paying jobs out there that they can't find people to do.
Currently, we do some cabinet making in building construction, the basics of it. There is a cabinet making course at the State Department, but we have found that a standalone course, we haven't found much interest in that. And talking about the dental assisting, that's going to require a little bit more research, and there's no state approved course right now.
So is that really one of the limitations, is you have to find that intersection of what industry wants, what the students want, and what we can get certified as a course?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there anything else? Are those the three big things?
Those are the three legs of the stool.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Barnhart, did you have anything? I thought you raised your hand. I was making sure. Anybody else? That was very thorough. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. You've done a lot of work
Thank you for your time.
in all this. Thank you. All right, Dr.
All right. Thank you so much. Really excited about these opportunities, and we look forward to bringing more detail about those. At this time, Dr. Holden is coming forth. There was a question brought before the administration to answer, and it was about school assignment plans. I will caveat that this is an exercise in our due diligence as administration to answer questions, but does not represent the recommendation of the administration. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Holden to go through this presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Ross. As Dr. Ross just alluded to, a question was posed to the administration: what would it take to make Crossroads a middle school for the 24-25 school year without new construction or before new construction? So these slides that you're going to see tonight represent options that are responses to that question. Not recommendations, but options that are responses. And as we go through that, we're going to look at three broad school assignment plan scenarios. So three broad school assignment plan scenarios. And then with one of those options, we're going to be, or one of those scenarios, we're going to be looking at options related to that specific scenario. Now, the term school assignment plan broadly refers to the method by which students are assigned to a school in School District 5. That primarily involves our attendance zones, but it also involves the combination of other rules, choice, magnet programs, programming options that exist that help us determine where a student should attend school. When we go through each option and the scenarios, you're going to see the potential enrollment as well as the percentage of students in each scenario at each school who are classified as pupils in poverty. Now, pupils in poverty is the standard for how we evaluate the level of poverty within a school. It comes from a variety of data sources, including student nutrition software, the South Carolina Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Office, and PowerSchool. But like I said, it's the primary metric by which poverty levels are evaluated and determined in South Carolina's public schools. That's the standard for what we've included here. Just to give some indication, it is one measure that we've chosen to include here besides the overall enrollment to tell you something about that specific configuration. Now, with the data that we've included here, there's a variety of processes that my team have got a great department. We worked on to try to determine these schools of residence and make sure we had everything lined up perfectly with every possible combination or factor that could play into a student's attendance. So the enrollment data that we've got here is as of the 45th day of this school year unless otherwise noted. And the enrollment data focuses on students in grades 3 through 7 because those are the students who will be enrolled in grades 6 through 8 at some point during the 24-25, 25-26, and 26-27 school years. So again, we're focused on grades 3 through 7 because those are the students who will matriculate through middle school at some point in the next 3 school years. The other part here is when we look at some of these enrollment numbers, I want to stress up front, these are not projections, okay? These are enrollment numbers where I've taken the enrollment in a specific grade level or school of residence and moved them up by year through a specific grade level, through a specific school year. So one of the questions that you might ask is, does this account for population changes or community changes? No. I'm taking the enrollment as it existed on the 45th day of this school year and moving it up. We typically do internal annual projections. We do that every year, but not until the 90th, 135th, and 180th day of a school year, and we do that for only the subsequent school year. We don't attempt internally to project that out 3 years in advance. So again, what you're looking at in these numbers is not a projection. It is simply rolling the students up. It also doesn't account for factors that may ultimately influence a student's enrollment. Maybe they choose to participate in a school choice option, a magnet program. Maybe they're in a special program. Maybe they choose 5, okay? For our elementary options here, as we look at where students would end up in the alternative middle school configurations, we're primarily looking at their elementary school of residence, not what elementary school do they attend right now for the middle school options. We're looking at where are they actually zoned, because most of the middle school configurations that we're looking at here, most of those deal with what elementary school are you zoned for. So for that, we're not looking at the school of enrollment, we're looking at where does the student actually reside. And when we looked at some alternative elementary configurations, that was based off of what is their current elementary school, okay, for obvious reasons once we get to those slides, but I do want to establish those parameters up front for how these calculations were determined. So scenario 1 is our first option here, and there's first scenario, and we have 2 options within scenario 1 that are somewhat related, so we package them together. The intention of this scenario is answering that first initial question, which is to serve students in the Dutch Fork and Irmo clusters in a middle school where they're in grades 6 through 8. So we had the following grade level configurations. All Dutch Fork and Irmo area elementary schools serve students in grades pre-K through 5. No elementary level school assignment plans change for students in grades pre-K through 5. So the exact same attendance lines that we think of now, the exact same choice and magnet offerings, all in place here under scenario 1. The big change here is that the current Crossroads Intermediate, Dutch Fork Middle, and Irma Middle become middle schools serving students in grades 6 through 8. So scenario 1, we have 3 middle schools, grades 6 through 8 in the Dutch Fork and Irmo areas. And middle level school assignment plans do change for some students in order to accommodate that. Obviously, Crossroads would be adding 2 grade levels, Dutch Fork adding 1, and Irmo having to expand its 6th grade offerings considerably. So scenario 1A, this is what we look at. And this is more of a geographic alignment. So based off of which school attendance zones are in proximity to one another or directly bordering them. And so under this model, you have Harbison West, Leap-Hart, and Seven Oaks going to Crossroads for grades 6 through 8. You have Ballantyne, Dutch Fork, Oak Point, and River Springs going to Dutch Fork Middle School for grades 6 through 8. And you have H.E. Corley, Irmo Elementary, and Nursery Road going to Irma Middle School for grades 6 through 8. The next slide shows you the enrollment breakdown for what that would look like. So you can see the range of grade levels, grades 6 through 8 there at Crossroads, and you can see what the enrollment would be in 24-25 and 25-26 and 26-27. And again, that's where we take that school of residence and we've rolled the students up subsequent years. You can also see the pupils in poverty percentage based on that alignment of schools and configuration of schools, which is the one that's strictly based on geography. You can see Dutch Fork Middle School, grades 6 through 8, and you can see Irma Middle School, grades 6 through 8. Scenario 1B takes a slightly different approach. Again, same idea. We have 3 middle schools in the Dutch Fork and Irmo clusters, all serve students in grades 6 through 8. And you can see under this model, H.E. Corley, Leap-Hart, and Nursery Road go to Crossroads, Ballantyne, Dutch Fork, Oak Point, River Springs remain at Dutch Fork Middle School, and Harbison West, Irmo Elementary, and Seven Oaks are the schools that feed into Irma Middle School. And with this one, you can see it shifts a little bit, the enrollment. It also changes the pupils in poverty at both Crossroads and Irma Middle School and brings those numbers closer together, again, assuming those students roll up and attend the school they would be zoned for here. You can see Dutch Fork doesn't change at all. Dutch Fork Middle School doesn't change at all. That's because the 4 schools that were assigned to Dutch Fork Middle School in scenario 1A remain assigned to Dutch Fork Middle School in scenario 1B. Now again, under these 2 options, 1A and 1B, the primary difference is in which schools we have feeding into Irmo Middle and which schools we have feeding into Crossroads. And option 1A is strictly based on geography. Those schools on the western side of that area, so H.E. Corley, Ballantyne, and and Nursery Road would go to one school, and then Harvest and West, Leapart, and Seven Oaks go to a different school. Scenario 1B takes that away and looks at how do we better balance enrollment on 1B, okay? Now, I think one of the obvious questions that comes up here is, why are there only 4 schools attending Dutch Fork Middle School when traditionally the Dutch Fork cluster has served 5 elementary schools? So H.E. Corley typically feeds into Dutch Fork Middle School and Dutch Fork High School. And so scenario 2 looks at how can that be done? How can we look at the initial question that was posed to the administration, okay, and not disrupt the traditional cluster alignment in our schools? So the intention here is to serve all students in the IRMO cluster in a middle school when they're enrolled in grades 6 through 8 without impacting the traditional cluster alignment, because scenarios 1A and 1B do disrupt that a little bit, bringing H.E. Corley in, at least for the middle school scenarios, okay? So the grade level configurations that you're going to see in scenario 2 are as follows. All Dutch Fork area elementary schools serve students in grades pre-K through 6. So that's a change, okay? And I'll show you why in just a second. The school assignment plans do not change, though. So the school zones don't change, okay? The primary assumption here, though it's not always going to be the case, the primary assumption is that a student remains at their elementary school for 6th grade. Now, of course, a student could change residences. They could go to a magnet program. They could do another school choice option. There's a lot of reasons why a student wouldn't attend the same school, but the primary assumption of this model is the student does remain in that school. And again, we don't account for all these different choice options here. That's just the assumption here of this model. And we assume most students would choose that, again, without that change of residence, magnet choice, and those other factors, okay? All IRMO elementary schools, however, are pre-K through 5. So this would have the Dutch Fork elementary schools at pre-K through 6 and the IRMO elementary schools at pre-K through 5. None of the elementary school assignment plans change in that area. And then the current Crossroads Intermediate and IRMO Middle become middle schools serving students in grades 6 through 8, all from the IRMO cluster. And that does change the school assignment plans for some students in the IRMO area in grades 6 through 8. So let's look at what that scenario 2 might look like, okay? And when we do that, let's talk about what Dutch Fork specifically looks like and why it is not practical to add 6th grade there without disrupting that cluster alignment. So if we look at the Dutch Fork cluster and what it would look like if we did it based on this elementary school of residence, okay, so just what elementary school are you zoned for? And we take all 5 elementary schools that are currently zoned for Dutch Fork Middle School. You can see that it's at least 1,200 students in all 3 years, okay? 24, 25, 25, 26, and 26, 27. The next factor that I considered was, because I'll be honest, Dutch Fork Middle School is one of the hardest schools to project for, especially for 7th grade. Mr. Sav and I have talked a lot about that over the last few years. If I took a different combination, so this is where I said otherwise noted. If I took a different combination, so I said, let me go back to last year, 22. Faster than a NASCAR pit crew. That was outstanding, Ms. Garris. Thank you so much. All right, so if we look at a slightly different way of calculating that information, okay, and we take the 22-23 5th graders, and I may need help. There we go. Sorry, we'll back it up one. We take the 2022-23 5th graders, okay, who were zoned for or who were attending a Dutch Fork area elementary school. So there are 422 students in our district who on the 45th day of last year were attending a Dutch Fork zoned elementary school. And I combine that with the data for who's at Dutch Fork Middle School right now. That would actually give me 1,451 students, okay? If I did that for next year, where then I'm taking I've got the fifth graders right now, who would go to Dutch Fork Middle School next year if they were at those 5 schools. That's going to be 390 students. Add in the 422 who were there in 22-23, and the 520 who are moving up from 7th to 8th grade. I've got 1,332 students. And again, 25-26 and 26-27, you can see more than 1,200 students. So one of the concerns here in looking at scenario 2 was the impact that would have on the facility at Dutch Fork Middle School because there is likely no scenario that we could propose there where we kept the cluster alignment the same, convert Dutch Fork Middle School 6 through 8, and it serves less than 1,200 students, no matter how you cut that math, okay? And again, we tried to show you 2 different ways to do it here. And again, I think you see the general trend. And I will say Dutch Fork Middle 7th grade has historically been one of the harder ones to predict simply based on a variety of factors. I would anticipate, again, this is not a projection, I would anticipate, though, that the numbers you see there would be greater by the time we actually approach the school year, just based on historic trends in that area. So scenario 2 has 2 different components to it. We've got a grade 6 component, and we've got a grade 7 and 8 component. Okay, so you can see grade 6. We've got a lot more colors on this map. That's because in grade 6, the Dutch Fork area students remain at their zoned elementary school, or the elementary school they were attending prior to 6th grade. And then we took a different approach here, and we put 2 schools at Crossroads and 3 schools at Irmo, Harbison West and Leapart at Crossroads, Irmo, Nursery Road, and Seven Oaks, going to Irmo Middle School, okay? And then I want to show you how that decision to do that would impact first, how's it going to impact Dutch Fork area elementary schools, should we go forward with something like that. This calculation method was a little bit different. What we did here was we took the existing enrollment, the 45th day enrollment at those elementary schools, and I added 2 different numbers to it to give us a range of possibilities here. First, I took the average enrollment of every grade level, and I said, what if we added an average enrollment grade level to the existing existing enrollment? That was one way of saying, okay, we're going from a pre-K through 5 school to a pre-K through 6. I could add the average enrollment to give us an approximate number of how many students might be there if we were to add the average size grade level. I also went with a more drastic scenario. What's the maximum enrollment they have in any grade level right now? What's the highest enrollment that we see? And let's add that in instead. So in both calculations, I took the average enrollment and the maximum enrollment in a grade level, and I added that to the existing pre-K through 5 enrollment. That's what we're going to see on the next chart. So you can see the 45th day enrollment at Ballantyne, Dutch Fork Elementary, H.E. Corley, Oak Point, and River Springs. And you can see the average enrollment of all the K-5 grade levels. I didn't include pre-K in the average because that would throw off the numbers a little bit there. I then gave you an enrollment of what if we added the average enrollment. It's column 3, added the average enrollment to the 45-day enrollment. I then gave you the greatest enrollment of any grade level, K through 5. And what if we added that enrollment, added the greatest enrollment to the current average or to the current enrollment on the 45th day. And then the next to last column, I added to give you some perspective here. Over the last 5 years, so the previous 5 years, going back to the 18-19 school year, what's the greatest total enrollment that school facility has had? And then I included the 45th day pupils in poverty number at each of those schools. Again, assuming the students remain the same, that's what we'll be looking at there in terms of the pupils in poverty, again, based off of the 45th day numbers that we have in those schools currently. Grades 7 and 8, you can see we've got Harbison West and Leapart, as we mentioned on the 2 slides ago, maybe 3 slides ago, I apologize. Crossroads is going to be the school serving Harbison West and Leapart. At Dutch Fork Middle School, you can see all 5 schools that are traditionally in the Dutch Fork cluster are at Dutch Fork Middle School at that point, because again, that's grades 7 and 8. And then for Irma Middle School, you can see, again, the same schools that we saw just a few slides ago, Irma Elementary, Nursery Road, and Seven Oaks. And this is what that enrollment might look like, as well as the grade level configurations. You'll notice there that Dutch Fork Middle School, I've listed only grades 7 and 8. That's because it does not become a grade 6 through 8 school under scenario 2. However, Crossroads and Irmo do become grade 6 through 8 schools under this model. And you can see what the enrollment would be across those two schools if those students were to matriculate up over the next 3 years. Now, scenario 3 looks at this very differently, and I'll be honest, because once we got to that point where you saw the slide we had just done a few slides ago, where we said, what would it look like to put 6th grade back in the elementary schools in the Dutch Fork cluster? We said, what if we continued that over to Irmo to ensure consistency across the district? So the intention of option 3 is to further that discussion. Okay, so scenario 1A and 1B, approach it from a true, we're going to have 3 middle schools in the Dutch Fork and Irmo clusters. Scenario 2 approaches it from a, let's keep the cluster alignment in place. Let's continue with having a Dutch Fork and an Irmo zone, but let's figure out a way to approach the middle school problem a little differently. And scenario 3 says an even more different approach there, where every student in grade 6 in the Dutch Fork and Irmo clusters, just like we saw for Dutch Fork under scenario 2, every student in the Irmo and Dutch Fork clusters would actually be in an elementary school when they're enrolled in grade 6. So here are those grade level configurations. All Dutch Fork and Irmo elementary schools serve students in grades pre-K through 6. That doesn't change any school assignment plans for students in grades pre-K through 5. And again, we assume some factors like school choice, magnet, change of residence are going to impact individual student enrollment plans. The idea here is that you remain at your current elementary school for grade 6. And then no middle level school assignment plans change for students in grades 7 and 8. For here, this one, we've provided the enrollment for what it would look like if we were to put 6th grade back in an elementary school, okay, in the Dutch Fork and Irmo clusters. Same exact method I just showed you, where we look at the average enrollment of a grade level as well as the maximum enrollment of a grade level, and then we add that to the 45th day enrollment. And what you can see on this slide is on the previous slide that I showed you that was similar looking to this one, we looked at only the elementary schools in the Dutch Fork area. And this one, we're looking at the elementary schools in the Dutch Fork and Irmo area. And so you can see column 1 is the school. Column 2 shows you that 45th day enrollment, pre-K through 5. Column 4 shows you the enrollment if the grade level with the average enrollment is added in. Okay. Column 6 is the enrollment if we add in the grade level with the greatest enrollment. And then the next to last column there shows the greatest enrollment at that school over the previous 5 years as of the 45th day. And the last one shows you the current pupils in poverty in each of those schools. Okay? And this is what that would look like for grades pre-K through 6. It's the exact same attendance lines that we have for elementary school. It just remains in place for when those students get to 6th grade. Nothing changes there. I will say, and we don't have a slide for this, but the middle school assignments would remain the same for grades 7 and 8. So we would have 5 schools going to Dutch Fork Middle School, and we'd have 5 schools going to Irmo Middle School. Irmo Elementary, Nursery Road, Harbison West, Lee Park, and Seven Oaks. Irmo Middle, Ballantyne, River Springs, Oak Point, Dutch Fork, H.E. Corley going to Dutch Fork. Okay. Now, I will say, I presented a lot of options. I presented primarily student-level data here. Enrollment, pupils in poverty, as a quick measure to give you some understanding of what that attendance zone looks like. However, those aren't all the factors that we consider when making such a decision. For example, I provided some idea of the historic enrollments of those schools. However, some of those options may require portables. We'd have to look at specific programming needs at each school. All scenarios would require some adjustments in staffing. But the summary here that we have is that we were posed that question. What would it look like, what would it take to make Crossroads a middle school for the 24-25 school year without new construction or before new construction? And what we wanted to show you was there's multiple options for elementary and middle level school assignment plans. The presentation lays out 4 of those options for what we could do. We've got a scenario 1, which had 2 options there, A and B. The intention there is to serve all students in Dutch Fork and Irmo in a middle school in grades 6 through 8. You've got scenario 2, which is all students in the Irmo cluster are going to a middle school for grades 6 through 8. And then scenario 3, which is all students in the Dutch Fork and Irmo clusters are in an elementary school when they're enrolled in grade 6. However, these options are options, and as Dr. Ross stated, these are not the recommendations of the administration, they are responses to the question. This time I'll turn it back to Dr. Ross before we proceed.
All right, so do we have questions? I see Ms. Snipes immediately raise her hand.
Well, thank you for this. This is a lot to take in. But it's not the district's recommendation, and I wanted to know when we would have the district's recommendation for comparison.
Great question. Our goal is to go through that 5-step process that we've outlined. Today was the us going through the instructional plan review. We'll look at financing options on December the 11th. And in January the 8th, what we're going to do is in a workshop present to you certain options. But if you remember, in our first workshop, we talked about 7 questions. And one of those questions had to do with utilization rates. And I think for us to make those decisions about what that plan is, we need to decide as a board, or the board needs to decide what kind of utilization rates and programs that we're going to have. So to answer your question, we think at the conclusion of the January 8th meeting, we would have kind of the main direction points for the board to put a plan together.
Mr. Satterfield.
Yeah, I had a couple quick questions. Dr. Ross, could you refresh my memory on the feeder? I know that the Irmo Middle School kids are going to Irmo High School and Dutch Fork to Dutch Fork. Crossroads Middle School, how is that broken down, and where will these students be distributed?
And currently, or in the proposal?
Well, on these proposals.
Okay, I'll let Dr. Holden talk about these proposals here.
Yeah. The intention is to not adjust the high school lines. This only dealt with the middle school lines. So the intention as much as possible, we either have to come back and talk about the high school lines, or we'd be looking at the existing lines for the high school would remain in place. So where we see H.E. Corley coming into the Irmo cluster for middle school, the intention, at least at this point of that presentation of that option, would be that they would return, H.E. Corley students would return to the Dutch Fork cluster for high school purposes.
Well, I know we discussed this true feeder system, and I know we had a lot of discussion about that, a lot of options, obviously, and here's some more. But the idea of, I have some concerns with the enrollment numbers, especially when you start, if you're going to take Crossroads and Irmo Middle School and send them to Irmo High School, or is it by feeder by elementary school where they end up in high school? But the other thing that I hope that will be considered is really concerned by the pupils in poverty percentages, because that greatly affects instructional programs, it affects staffing, it affects the size of your classrooms. It just affects a lot of things, a lot of additional resources and things like that. And we see it, it's right there in front of us. And so I hope that that's something that we really, give strong consideration to. But I was initially curious about what I know the Irmo Middle School's kids are going to Irmo High School and the Dutch Fork Middle, but I was just curious. I was looking for that extra little space on your presentation to show the high school that they were headed to. So I was just curious about that. Thank you. Yes.
So, Mike, I mean, just for conversation's sake and on your question, I mean, I feel like when we first started talking about what would it look like, I know several board members talked about this, what would it look like to make some adjustments to the Crossroads model? We've talked about the intermediate model in our district, and the long-term plan is to eliminate the intermediate model and go to a 4 middle school model in our district. 5 middle school model in our district. This conversation, from what I've taken from it, was that this is a temporary solution, not necessarily to create a new middle school right now. It's to address a specific concern that we've had expressed to us as board members relating to the model of the sixth grade standalone, not and understanding that a lot of our concerns regarding facilities and instructional, like school models, I mean, a lot of that rides on a bond referendum. That is not necessarily a guarantee for us. And what we've heard consistently, and I am not trying to cause outrage or anything like that, but we have had a lot of concern about Crossroads and that where the students are right now, and if it's not working right now, is, you know, should we talk about another option as a conversation? And, you know, you just can't have conversations. That's why you have to talk about these in board meetings. It's not meant to create mass hysteria. We can only talk about this at a board meeting. And so, I mean, I think that that's where that conversation was coming from. I mean, when I look at this model, I look at the third scenario and I see that it's the least disruptive to the students because the students stay where they were. They are in a familiar environment, but there is a staffing concern, a teacher concern, where, you know, and all of that, if we were to make a change, we would need to make sure that those conversations happened sooner rather than later. And that, to me, is the conversation we should be having as a board. Is this something that the board believes that while we talk about facilities and long-term plans, is a short-term solution that has the least amount of impact on the student, while understanding that this cannot be compared in any way to what's happening in Richland 1, because it is not. We are not trying to throw a teacher in a situation with little notice and rip them away from students. It would not impact this academic year at all. We would obviously encourage input from the administration and staff and principals and teachers on what that may look like. But the conversation, if that's something that we're all seriously thinking about, it has to start happening like right now, because the days and weeks and, you know, keep flying by. So I think that that's why we're having this conversation.
Well, and thank you for that. And that's the reason that I did want to bring some of those things up, because it's a lot more complicated than just saying, okay, well, let's vote for this. There are a lot of other
it's not even just teachers. You have like bookkeepers and secretaries and principals and administrators and one-off positions. Where do they go? What's the best fit? Where are those conversations? I mean, those conversations logistically have to happen. But what I don't want to happen is like a random vote to happen in May and then have to figure that out in the summer. Because that's not fair. I don't know. I mean, Ms. Huddle, do you have any?
Well, first of all, I appreciate you guys putting this on the agenda and talking about it and showing us the options. We passed a policy that we wanted to move to 6 through 8, so we need to start talking about it. And I hear from a lot of parents that, again, it's not a reflection on Crossroads. I've been there. The administration's awesome. The teachers are awesome. It's just very difficult on the kids. And so a lot of parents, they think about moving or private school, or we're getting ready to have a charter school. So, I mean, I appreciate the fact that this situation's been in effect for years, and we're talking about it. And I think that's healthy. I did have a question, though, if you could go back to 1A. And this is also kind of in line, I think, with Mr. Satterfield's question. I didn't write this down fast enough. Just the alignment on 1A.
Almost there, sorry.
That's all right.
All right.
Almost there. Okay, so Harbison West, Lee Part, and Seven Oaks would be Crossroads, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Dutch Fork would be Ballantyne, Dutch Fork Elementary, OPS, River Springs, and then H.E. Corley, Nursery Road, and Irmo Elementary. Okay, so here's where I'm headed with this. H.E. Corley, Irmo Elementary, and Nursery Road all currently would go to Irmo High School, correct?
Can you repeat that one more time? Sorry.
H.E. Corley, Irmo Elementary, and Nursery Road all currently go to Irmo High School?
H.E. Corley is currently a Dutch Fork school.
Okay.
For Dutch Fork Middle and Dutch Fork High.
Okay. And then Ballantyne does go with a split feeder, right? Most
Overwhelmingly
of
the
it.
Dutch Fork area, but there are a few students who are zoned for Chapin High School, primarily
Okay.
in one
But-
geographic zone.
But that's pretty much true to Dutch Fork. Those all go to Dutch Fork High, correct? Okay. And then Crossroads, Harbison West, Lee Park, and Seven Oaks all go to Irmo.
Yes, Harbison West, Lee Park, and Seven Oaks currently all go through Irmo Elementary and Nursery Road are Irmo schools as well. So the one school that really changes here and comes out of the Dutch Fork Middle School group is H.E. Corley. I will note, though, the presentation, and this goes to Mr. Satterfield's question as well, presentation only addressed middle school alignment, was not looking at high school alignment.
Right, I was just trying to do that here. So these all line up with the exception of H.E. Corley.
That is correct.
Correct, okay. That's all I had.
Yeah, that is correct. Scenario 1B, similar as well. Changes some of the actual middle school assignment patterns, but 1B, again, H.E. Corley is the school that traditionally in the Dutch Fork cluster for middle school and would change clusters for middle school purposes. Again, this presentation is primarily looking at it from that middle school lens, does not look at it from a high school lens.
And I would think kind of like from that high school lens, I mean, that's one of the concerns that we hear about Crossroads in general is that they feed into two different high schools or two different middle schools. And so they're there together and then they leave. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that kind of, if you look at it from a high school perspective, that's just something that I notice the most. So the other question that I have with some of this is if in any of these situations, how does it impact Escalares?
That is a good question. I'll defer, because we'd have to have some conversations with student service planning as well as with the academics office, because of course we have the magnet program that exists at Harbison West, Escalares, and then we have a sixth grade alignment pattern there, which brings Escalares students through the middle school. And so one of the key decisions we'd have to make here are questions like that. And what about our other magnet programs that we're currently offering at the elementary level? Where would, and what would that program look like if it currently only goes through fifth grade? Would we have to look at it through sixth grade? Ms. McCaskill or Dr. Harris, do you have anything you want to add about the issue of magnets and what that might look like under these options?
I don't think we've gotten that far into the weeds, to be quite honest. It really wasn't something that we recommended at this time, so we're just looking to see what the will of the board might be before we really dig that deep.
Right. So I guess that's it, Kevin. And one of the things I'm going to ask, and maybe you can kind of comment as, is kind of like where does the board stand on this, like from a future board conversation, so that we know, like, if we need to be putting it on the agenda for further discussion, for action. I mean, I would just encourage that to happen where we don't, what I don't want to do is be in a situation where we throw something out last minute and, you know, we haven't given the administration time to fully talk about this or be involved in that conversation. So,
Yeah,
Mr. Scully.
really just for clarification purposes, and forgive me if it's a result of my memory failing, but when the question is being asked about the 24-25 year, is that signaling the intent that Crossroads will undergo a change for the 24-25 year, or is that just a hypothetical?
I think that was the question that was asked by board members, was if we were to try to, if we were to try to make a change now, what does that look like? Because we've had different concerns raised by various folks. I mean, and I know Ms. Huddle has brought that up several times, and I've had the same questions, and I've heard it from other board members, so that's why we were having the conversation.
Okay, so
We
this
just
wasn't,
wanted to be able to give the district enough time to be able to, I mean, this obviously took a lot of work.
so
and
it's still an open question
it's an
as to
open, it's an
whether
open question.
there would be a change for the next academic year.
Right, like that's why we're talking about this, to see if it's something that is feasible, something that the board wants to pursue, to get feedback from the administration.
Okay, and just to follow up, when you're saying the options are not recommendations of the administration, I understand that you're not taking a position for a recommendation at this point in time. Are these the likely options that you're going to select from for a recommendation, or these are off the table completely, these three?
I'll tell you, the superintendent, I don't recommend any of these
Okay.
options. I don't recommend any of them. What we were doing was strictly due diligence on numbers. There are a lot of factors that are not baked into this. So we're just showing the numbers portion of it, but we don't know. There are a lot of programs that we have in these buildings. Walk these buildings with these principals and go over these options with the principals. You'll hear there's other issues that we need to address. So we're doing due diligence and answering the question, but it's our recommendation that we continue the path we set forward, move on the January the 8th. One thing, this doesn't address any of the issues we have in Chapin. So we're going to do a lot of movement, and we still haven't addressed what we have in Chapin. My philosophy is to touch it once. Rezoning is not popular.
Right.
But I want to do one comprehensive rezoning plan from Piney Woods to Piney Grove and do it one time. This is a stopgap that I think will cause more issues programmatically and financially than it would in terms of fixing one issue. So none of these are my recommendation, but we wanted to show you that we were doing due diligence to look at what those options would be.
Yeah, and I guess since you asked for or the board's kind of feeling on it is, I agree. I would rather have a single permanent solution that has been thoroughly vetted with diligence than a temporary. So I would not be in favor of anything rushed just for without it being, the intention being a permanent solution.
I just kind of want to just comment, though. I mean, on one of these scenarios, there's no rezoning. It's keeping all of the students where they are, so it's the least disruptive to the student in scenario 3. It's not rezoning or creating middle school models. I mean, I just don't, I guess I just don't see it that way. Ms. Snipes.
Just because you kind of asked about board feedback, I think we could probably sit here another hour and go back and forth about our personal opinions on this. But since we're not taking action on it, I personally think in terms of deeper discussion and rather needs to be back on the agenda, personally think it needs to be tabled until we get the district's recommendations so we can actually do a thorough comparison of this versus what the district is suggesting that we do, and just based on the number of teachers from Crossroads that have reached out this week with their concerns as this has kind of hit the fan, I think that when we get the district's recommendation, I think it's going to be important that we consider the feedback from what we've heard from people who are in that school every day and having to work in that population, because I see from social media and all the things, there are just such varied opinions about what's going on and what people's concerns are. And some people have concerns and other people love it. It's just a lot. It's all encompassing. And I just want to be, careful, because as we talk about the community and the feedback that we get, but the principal and the teachers at those schools are also a part of our community and may have kids in the district too. And I just want to make sure we're looking at all the pieces as we make these decisions.
Mr. Satterfield.
Yeah, I just want to say one last thing, and that is that I know that the Crossroads principal is sitting here and listening to all this, and I know that teachers are listening, and I think what Dr. Ross said earlier is this is not a recommendation. And so I don't want anything up in the air. I mean, I want the water as clear as possible, that this is not a recommendation. It was brought before us for discussion, and somebody offered some options, possible options. But I don't want teachers to panic or say, well, I'm worried about stability, or I'm worried about where my job's going to be next year. None of those things. So just know that Dr. Ross made it quite clear, I think, and I don't want to leave any smoke in here or anything up in the air, so.
Ms. Huddle?
One item I would ask for if the administration is that if we're, going to look at this on January 8th, that it sounds like, and I understand looking at it in terms of a bigger picture, but I think that bigger picture may involve a bond referendum. And so I just ask that we have a scenario on how can we meet our policy goal of 6 through 8 in the event that we don't have a bond referendum, that we look at it both ways. And that may mean one of these hybrid type approaches with scenario 2, or it may mean that we can't address Chapin at the same time. I mean, I get the desire to do it all at once, but we also have to look at the reality that we may not be able to pass a bond referendum. And if that happens, I think we still need to try to do the best that we can with what we have.
I agree with that. I mean, I struggle with the intermediate model just in general. I think I've said that. I mean, in any form, and so that's my concern, is that it may not be it's the problem with the model, not the instruction or the administration at all. It's just the model that I struggle with. And my problem is knowing that we have struggles and not addressing that now. I just feel like the students now are at a disservice. And that's why I was curious when you made the request about what those numbers look like, what they looked like, and what that short-term option is that's as least disruptive, because you don't want to move children multiple times. I mean, that's never ideal at all. You don't want to move teachers multiple times either. So, I mean, it's definitely worth the conversation. So, I appreciate that. Dr. Ross.
To that point, our intent, and we're working on that now, we'll talk with Dr. Harris, and presenting 2 options to the board. I guess it would be in addition to these, but option A is, without any resources, how do we move to the board policy that we did on grade structure? And then to the ideal. And so I want you to keep in mind that our goal is to preserve our magnet programs. Our goal is to preserve the special education strategies and programs that we have. So, and our goal is to reduce the number of portables, all of which haven't been accounted for in this plan. So I would ask that we continue with that process, look at us doing the workshop on January the 8th as we present these 2 options for a more systematic view of the work that we're doing. But we will provide it as if there is no additional funds from a potential bond, and then what are some options there.
All right, anything else? Thank you very much, Dr. Van Holden. I call you like that's like one name, Dr. Holden. I apologize for that. I know that took a lot of work into those options, so I appreciate that. So that moves us to item 23, which is the discussion of proposed revisions to board policy IKE, promotion and retention of students, Exhibit K.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board and our community. We have some changes in our promotion policies within the state, and so our Chief of Academics, Ms. Tina McCaskill, will bring us these changes.
Good evening once again. So IKE, with the promotion and retention, the state, with the report card, they are moving to not just graduation rate, but on-time graduation rate. So this current school year, they will be looking at our current ninth graders and then any fifth year graduation students is who will be counted with these numbers. And then the following year, which is what, 24, 25, is when the other grade levels will actually be kind of grandfathered into this. So the numbers of courses to be identified as a sophomore changes from 5 to 6. Then to go and be a junior, it changes from 11 to 12. And then to be a senior, it changes from 17 to 18. So it bumps up by 1 credit for each year. And you'll be rated on each grade level, having your students moving along on time as they should be moving. So in what we currently are looking at graduation rate is just from 9th grade to 12th grade. By the end of 12th grade, are you graduating in 4 years? Now we're going to be scored on the number of students in 9th grade that truly become sophomores. How many sophomores that truly become juniors, and then how many juniors truly become seniors. So it's that on-time graduation rate, and they've set the criteria for that. And so to meet that criteria, that's what the update is here for this policy.
Okay, do I have a, Matt, did you have a question? Ms. Snipes?
I'd like to make a motion that the board review and discuss the proposed revisions to board policy.
You don't have to make it a motion for discussion.
That's what I just asked.
For discussion.
No, I don't have no questions.
Okay. I apologize. It's
okay.
very late. We try
I
not to do
understand,
this.
believe me.
Okay.
I do have I do have a question. So I think it's called dual credit when the universities come in. That counts, right?
That counts,
Okay.
yes.
Quick question.
Hold up, Mr. Hogan, did you have a question? And then I'll come to you.
So, Ms. McCaskill, how is this going to work out with, like if a student we have as a freshman and a sophomore and say his family moves out their junior year, will that be captured in that calculation? Or will it be used as a student that didn't meet the graduation requirements in 4 years?
So if they move away, is that what you said?
Right, yeah, if they move out of the district, will that data go against, will that pupil that's no longer in our community, will that go against our data as far as graduation from start to finish in 4 years, or will they have a formula for that?
There's a way to track that. We actually have to track that and document where those students have gone, and as long as we can document where those students have gone, then they do not count against us. But if we can't document where they are gone, it does count against us.
Okay.
Mr. Scully?
Yeah, it's been a long meeting. We got these shirts. Can you tell me again when we're supposed to wear these?
That has nothing to do with what she just said.
October 30th,
You are
but you
so-
can wear them anytime.
This guy. This guy. I mean,
Point of
out of
order.
order. You're out of order, Mr. Scully. Oh, goodness, it is late. Does anyone have a question germane to item 23? If not, do I have any motions?
I'll move that we adjourn.
Do I have a second? Mr. Hogan, any discussion? Oh, my gosh. All right, I'm calling for the vote. All in favor? And everyone has voted. It is 7-0. And we will adjourn to the next meeting. Thank you. Thank you very much for staying so late, everyone. I know it's a very late meeting. Thank you.